Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today it's time to talk about the top 10 trainers rotating, or the biggest losses, or just the best cards that are rotating, however you want to phrase it, in this upcoming rotation 2024, which will be happening sometime in March at the same time Temporal Forces is released. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I think it's going to be super exciting. Obviously, the rotation, we're losing a lot of cards. We're losing a whole year's worth. I think 2022's, I think that's the right year. Or no, 2021. Yeah, 2021. There we go. The E block of cards. So we're losing all those, and that's going to be interesting. This is also special energy. On this list, the special energy aren't that good, but I'll be mentioning them. I have actually a bunch of honorable mentions. If you think I've missed anything, or if you think I've misordered anything, you can leave that in the comments. And also in a pinned comment down below, I should have a link to a survey that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using this in an upcoming video. I might update this list, and you can respond your like card, the biggest trainer losses and the biggest Pokemon losses. So I'll be doing Pokemon coming up. But first of all, some honorable mentions. First of all, Fog Crystal, and Energy Recycler. First of all, Fog Crystal. I feel like a lot of people would say like, or all these cards. If I didn't mention them, people would be like, I feel like those could be on the list. And I think they could be. Fog Crystal is pretty decent to from basic Psychic Energy and basic Psychic or basic Psychic Pokemon. From your deck, reveal and put into your hand, then shuffle your deck. It's decent. We have a lot of replacements though. It's not like crucial. It's nice for the decks it's in. It's a pretty good card, specifically for the Gardevoir deck. There's a lot of stuff the Gardevoir deck's losing. Some of the cards are on this list or would be on the Pokemon list, but some aren't. It's losing a bunch of things, but it still has lots of options. Um, so yeah, Fog Crystal, that's a card. I imagine some people would say it's important, but it's not that important. Energy Recycler, same deal. This is useful in a few very niche scenarios. Also, if a card is rotating, but the other cards is good with, they're also all rotating, that kind of knocks it down some, in my eyes. But Energy Recycler here, pretty nice. Allowing you to cover a lot of basic energy up to 5, but why would you really need 5? That's a lot. It's very niche that you need that many. Usually you need up to like 3, and then you could do Super Rod. And Super Rod's a very good card and not rotating. And so usually 4 Super Rod would be enough. And so Energy Cycle is very niche. And then Avery. Honestly, Avery has won me so many games. It's a really awful card. It's really bad. Or it's not really bad. It's pretty mediocre, but a lot of people play it, and it's not good enough. Like people just play it and then they win because their decks like they're like, oh, why didn't I set up? It's because you're playing Avery. So Avery is not a good card. I think a lot of people know that. Some people don't, and some people say it's a good card. They are not that. It's not. It has some very niche use cases. But if you would never play a card like Nemona, which is just draw 3, and if you think that card's hot trash, then you should also think Avery's hot trash. I don't think Avery's hot trash. I think like draw 3 and draw 4 has a place. Um, but generally Avery is one of the cards that is some people say is really good, and then they play it a lot, and then I win. So I'm a little satisfied because now my winner is gonna drop, but it's not very good, right? It's on here just because someone be like, what about Avery? Avery, not good. Next up, these cards also could be on the list, but they're also being semi-reprinted and they're honorable mentions. So I don't think their impact is that big. Zinnia's Resolve is probably the worst of these 3. It actually saw a lot of play, specifically in Japan. It's seen like a lot of play. Um, and so obviously it's a highly played card, and it's a good card. It's like a second tier supporter behind cards like a Research, a Boss, Iono, maybe Judge. Um, but it is a pretty good card, but it's also being more or less reprinted with Morty's Conviction. Not the same card, but a very similar card. So yeah, Cross Switcher again kind of being reprinted with Prime Catcher, and then we do have Counter Catcher, so it's not a huge deal. Also more. I don't know if the translations are necessarily correct either. So if I mention a card that's not out yet, the name might change. This is very common for trainers. The Battle VIP Pass, we got Buddy Pop, and Battle VIP Pass is the best of these cards, I guess. I think it's a little overrated, but it's still very good. But then it's also been semi-reprinted with Buddy Poffin, and of course we still have Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, and then we have a number of options, so it'll hurt some decks, some, but you do have Buddy Poffin to replace it for the most part. If you look at a deck like Charizard EX, Gardevoir, Chien-Pao, those decks can all replace it with Buddy Poffin, and then there's a Ditto as well that is out, which synergizes extremely well with Buddy Poffin. Um, And so yeah, it's pretty fine. But yeah, Cross Switcher, as I said, Prime Catcher is like replacing it, but it is an A spec. So keep that in mind. That's probably being quote reprinted the least out of these three because it does use up your A spec. But I think none of them quite deserve to be on the list. I could see an argument for any of these three though, and I think that'd be completely fair. And lastly, Battle Styles cards, which are, I guess, even more honorable mentions. We have four here. We got Rapid Strike Energy, Single Strike Energy, Power Tablet, and Elisa Sparkle split up on the right there. The issue with these is because they're very good cards. All four of these are, I think, the best battle styles like Trainers of Special Energy, and very well could be put on this list. Except they are very heavily dependent on obviously the Rapid Strike or Single Strike decks. They are not playable without them. I guess you could play Power Tablet, but the rest you literally cannot play without the battle styles cards, and they won't do anything. Power Tablet wouldn't do anything, and so for that reason, they're not going to be on this list. I will have as I said, a Pokemon list, and we'll see some of those cards on that list. Single Strike Energy is also probably the worst of these four in terms of how much play it's seen. It might be actually be the best card, but anyway, these cards are all good, but not making the list. Number 10 here, we got Melanie. Melanie, I would consider putting higher. I'm more so focusing on how dominant these cards are now, as opposed to how dominant they were. As Melanie was like super broken, or at least very good, not super broken, but it was quite good. But then it became worse over time. And then with rotation, we are losing a lot of its partners, stuff like Suicune V, Ice Rider, Calyrex V Max, Rapstrike Urshifu V Max, but then you still have stuff like Arceus V Star and Palkia V Star, specifically Palkia, and there are other options as well. And Milne pairs very well with those. It's a very powerful card, reminiscent of Welder, um, and then it's very good in a number of decks, so I think it's going to hurt those decks. Those aren't necessarily the most relevant decks right now, which is why it's not higher, but this card is still a pretty big loss. I think it's one that some people aren't really considering that much, but this is something I want to keep an eye out, specifically for Palkia, which is a decent deck. I think it's, again, one of the more underrated decks because it's not as flashy as a lot of other decks, but Melanie is still a very good card. We're going to be losing to rotation for a V-based deck. So it accelerates basic water from your discard, 2 on your V, and then you draw 3 cards. And as I said, we're losing a lot of Pokemon V, but not all the good ones. We're still going to have a bunch of V stars. Not really many V maxes, but Kyurem V Max could work with this, but we're losing it. Next up, number 9, Cheryl. Originally, this wasn't on my list, but now it is. Cheryl is a really powerful supporter. Heal all damage from all your evolution Pokemon, but then you discard all the energy attached to them. So that's pretty big, right? This can heal a lot. The reason this originally wasn't on it and isn't higher is because Professor Turo's scenario is moderately similar to this card because it scoops up a Pokemon and all cards attached to it, or not the cards attached to it, but it discards the cards attached, but like removes the damage. And so that card's really good and very similar to Cheryl. Of course, it isn't the same. It's arguably worse. I mean, it's worse probably for healing. And Cheryl's really good for healing. Admittedly, healing isn't the best right now, as there are a lot of one-shotting decks as well. But this card's really good, and I think it is a pretty notable loss to rotation, especially with there's the new Torterra EX, which is coming out, which is like a tanky based deck, and there are some other ones. So this is a pretty big deal. I think Cheryl is a good card. Suppose a lot of the cards in this list are supporters as well, because supporters are generally the most impactful types of cards, or types of trainers, maybe types of cards in general. So they're the biggest losses, but Cheryl is it's a very powerful card in certain scenarios, in certain decks, and can really turn the tides of a game. I'd say right now in the current meta, it's not as important, but at times it's been super impactful and is still something you need to watch out for in certain matchups and certain decks. Number 8, we got Spicy Seasoned Curry. That's right. This card is rotating. I bet not everyone, a lot of you probably didn't know that, or didn't realize that it came out in Astral Radiance and is rotating already, which is kind of annoying, and I don't like that they did that. I don't know why exactly they did that. I'm sure it has to do with the Japanese prints and various things. But this card is like really good in Cloth, Hisuian, Electrode V, and that's about it. It does also heal, but it does burn you, and it's kind of a weird card. The reason I put it this high was I think Cloth, Hisuian, Electrode V is like super good. It's not like it used to be a rogue deck. It's not a rogue deck anymore. It's definitively a meta deck now, I'd say. It's very solid. It's not like the top tier necessarily of deck, but it's so good. It's fighting and grass weakness are 2 great weaknesses to hit. Specifically grass weakness, and this really hurts Hisuian Electrode V. I think Cloth will get better post rotation, but Hisuian Electrode V will be essentially unplayable. I mean, okay, there are ways to play it, but they're not as good, and it's not really hitting that free 200 damage, which you want. You still have the Among Us guy, Brute Bonnet, there we go. Brute Bonnet, which poisons you, which is nice, but not, you need multiple special conditions to get the full value out of your Electrode V. Cloth will still be fine without this, although this does help Cloth some. But I think poison, like I think Cloth with the Brute Bonnet and some poison buffs. There's going to be some insane poison buffs. Are pretty good. You can do 50 with poison, which is a good amount. Spicy Seeing Curry is going to hurt that deck some, and that deck I think will have a lot of power, or it will be maybe part of a deck, and it'll be really good. And so this is a pretty notable loss. I think when this is going to again be overlooked, but a pretty big deal. Not in the grand scheme of things, but certainly for one deck that is potentially that is certainly a top 10 deck right now. Next up, we got Clara at number 7. I again wasn't really sure to put this card. I'm sure some people are gonna have it near the top of their list. I think Clara is a good card. It has good synergy with certain, like with the Galarian Bird trio, the Baby Galarian Birds, specifically Baby Galarian Moltres. But it's an interesting card, and it's very good recovery. It's the best supporter recovery right now. We obviously have Super Rod for item recovery, which to me like kind of outclasses. I mean, it's an item. It's not as good at recovery, but as an item, and it's pretty good. So to me, Super Rod outclasses Clara, but I know there are a lot of people who like Clara. In certain decks, Clara is super good. And some since you could also talk about Rescue Carrier here, I don't think Rescue Carrier is that good at recover up to 2 Pokemon with 90 HP or less from you discard in your hand, which is very niche. Clara is somewhat niche, but still useful. Also in Lost Zone, some people like this. I don't really like this card in Lost Zone, but I know some people do. And this certainly limits options, limits late game consistency as well. You can't get back. I mean, with Clara, you can get back your energy and your attacker. And with like Radiant Charizard, Sableye, I guess Cramorant doesn't need energy to attack, but like there are certain basic, very cheap attackers that Clara is super good with. Um, and for that reason, I think I had to put it on this list. I was considering not, but it's a good card. It's a very good card in certain scenarios, and is good recovery. We do also have Miriam if you need that like Pokemon recovery, but Miriam is different. Miriam is very different than Clara. It's more so like Energy Recycler, but for Pokemon, but it's actually very similar to Energy Recycler. Next up, we have Level Ball. Level Ball, again, I wasn't sure exactly how to put this one. Because we got cards like Buddy Pop and Ultra Ball, Nest Ball, but Level Ball search your deck for Pokemon with 90 HP or less, reveal it, put into your hand. That's incredibly powerful for decks that have low HP Pokemon, specifically decks that have Stage 1 low HP Pokemon. Of course, getting basics off this is useful, but you do have Nest Ball, and then you do have Buddy Poffin, which will get a lot of the same cards. But then you have like Kirlia, and you have Charmeleon, and you have mostly Kirlia, right? But you have some stage ones you can get off of this, which is insanely good. And losing Level Ball is going to be a bit of a pain for some of the decks. Notably Charizard. I don't think it's a massive hit for Charizard. I think it's like kind of a bit of a hit for Gardevoir, especially because it's losing Fog Crystal and Level Ball. As I said, Gardevoir is losing a wide variety of stuff. So the Curly engine will kind of not like losing Level Ball. But yeah, Level Ball is like a pretty big deal. In some decks, right? Those decks haven't been super great because single prizes have just been pretty terrible for quite a while, which has been unfortunate. Um, I mean, some single prizes have been good, but not like single prize not decks that work with Level Ball, right? You just don't see that too often, not like regular single prize evolution based decks. Um, I do think Level Ball will be a bit of a hit. I think some people really like Level Ball based decks, and to them, I'm sorry because those decks are cool. But yeah, Level Ball is rotating, and it's coming in at number 6. Number 5 here, we have Peonia. I think originally had this at like number 3, and I was like, people aren't going to agree with me on that. This card's underplayed. It has some synergy with Daisy's help. It's really nice, and it's good for control also. I'm someone who likes control. Peonia is a very good card for that. It's not guaranteed, but you'll like get the cards off your prize that you need, but it gives you knowledge of your prizes. It's really useful. If we didn't have Issue and Heavy Ball, this might be higher. I think Peonia is a really big deal, though. Of course, the cards it works with certain control things, Mewtwo Reunion, and the other reunions as well. But Mewtwo is like the only good one. That's a pretty big deal for those decks, but those are rotating. So we do, and like toolbox decks like Zorak Toolbox, which could play this. Again, it's rotating, and then I don't know. I think Peonia is it's a very good card though. It's allowing you to, it's some draw three. And as I said, like draw three on Avery, like just if it's just draw three, that's not good. But this is draw three plus gain prize knowledge, plus gain actual like prize cards, and like you can do some really powerful stuff with this. Um, and it is good. I think it's a card that also it fulfills a role. It's kind of like Gladion. Gladion, in my opinion, was better than Peonia for just grabbing stuff out of your prizes. But Peonia is really useful, really hard to play, really like it's really hard, so people don't play it that often. But it's quite good. I think belongs here at number 5, and if for no other reason than control. And control's right now one of the top decks in the game. Not necessarily needing Peonia, but it's still a very good deck. And we'll talk a bit more about that. Number 4, we got Escape Rope. Escape Rope, originally I didn't even have on the list, believe it or not, but each player switches their active one on their bench, and your opponent switches first. Um, so this has two things. One is a switch, and for being a switch, it's like fine. I mean, it's a switch, but you have switch and you have switch card. And so if it was just like another switch, I wouldn't put it on this list because we have switch and switch card. And really, what deck needs more than 8 switch? Pretty much nothing. And if you do, you have like options. Not like amazing. Oh, you have like Jet Energy. You have which like Lost Unused, and that's the deck that needs more than 8 switch, or like Iron Valiant. And then what deck needs more than 4 switch? Well, you look at Iron Valiant base decks, Iron Valiant EX, I should say, and Lost Zone base decks, but they have switch card. Right? They can use switch card. Guillotine V Star can't use switch card, but like you want to switch into Guillotine, not really out of the V Star, so you can use switch card. So if it's just a switch, it doesn't matter. It's nice to have another option, but then the big thing isn't it forces your opponents active to the bench. Now we do have this effect on Iron Bundle, and that's decent. Right, Iron Bundle is okay. Doesn't see a ton of play, but it is a thing you can use. Keep that in mind post rotation, but it's not like super easy to use versus Escape Rope, which is very easy to use because index it needs switch like Lost Zone, right? So Escape Rope's very good in Lost Zone with like turn on Cramorant KOs and can kind of force your opponent um to be on their toes. Iron Bundle, as I said, you can play Iron Bundle, but it's pretty rare. And it's a little awkward because now you need to get Iron Bundle instead of like your attacker or your engine or like something else that's very important. So I think without Escape Rope, this turn 1 switch forcing, I guess I don't remember. There's a term for it that I don't think it's used very often though. So if I say it, people will be like, I've not really heard that term. But and you can like force them to the bench, and that's useful. And there have been a lot of cards like that. Like I think Repel maybe. Um, you just repel, but like Escape Rope is very good. So 100% it's a card that is some decks are gonna miss. Some people are really gonna miss as well. I think it's gonna be. I'm a little sad it's rotating, but it's a good card. Luckily we do have Iron Bundle and we do have Switch, which are going to allow you to get a very similar effect. But of course Iron Bundle you need to like search out because it's a Pokemon. Number 3 here we have Echoing Horn. Of course, I love Control. This is very good in Control. This is like kind of makes Control. We have Erika's Invitation and Echoing Horns. Now you can grab Pokemon from your opponent's discard or hand. Echoing Horn is very good and it's rotating, so that will hurt Control, which I think some people will be happy about. I don't know if I'm happy about it. I kind of like Control, but I know it can be annoying to play against as well. I think this is a moderately interesting card, though. I'm sad it's rotating, I'll actually say. I'm not sure about the control part, but it's really good in other decks as well. If you look at my other favorite deck, Lost Zone, or any other deck that needs that like takes lots of knockouts, but can't knock out all types of Pokemon super easily because they can't hit like that 280, 300 damage threshold. You can Echoing Horn back a basic V, and like you can one-shot that easier, or like just a basic single prizer and then gust it up. Of course, you will need the gusting, but that's not like that hard to do. So then you have Echoing Horn, and Echoing Horn is a really big deal because obviously it gets that Pokemon back, allowing you to just not necessarily take free prizes, but kind of take free prizes. It's really powerful. I think Echoing Horn is definitely an underrated card in general decks, but in like spread decks, it's really good. It's pretty much playable in any deck. It's not played in any deck. It's not played in a lot of decks, but it's broken in Control and it's good in decks, in a lot of decks, right? You could also use it to get one of your opponent's Pokemon in play that potentially like hurts them, like a Spiritomb. That's pretty rare, but it is possible. Um, but yeah, and then you can get like Lumineon V into play, wait a few turns, then Gust and KO it, which is that same idea of getting quote free prizes, which is useful. And annoying. You could also technically fill up their bench space. This is a thing that like occasionally happens, but that's pretty rare. Um, yeah, I can't really think of the last time I've seen that happen. Um, Usually if that happens, then they'll just take a knockout, and then you have that free bench space anyway. Number two, that we have Raihan. Raihan is really good. In maybe a normal year, I would see this being the number one overall card, or even lower as well. But Raihan is not necessarily that top tier supporter like that, as I said, Research, Iono, Boss, and potentially Judge, but it's really good, right? It's really good when you play it, right? So you can only play it if one of your Pokemon is knocked out last turn. I mean, you can't rely on it a ton, and you need a basic energy in your discard pile. But if you have both those things, you accelerate that basic energy to one of your Pokemon in play, which is incredibly useful. Again, Melanie was very good for its like pseudo universal energy acceleration, particularly good in water decks, but playable in all sorts of other decks. But Raihan is actually universal energy acceleration, which is super broken. And then you get to search deck for any card put into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Again, like incredibly, I don't know if I say broken, but it's very, very good. Raihan giving universal search and energy acceleration is obviously really good. Um, in some senses, the card isn't played as much in like multi-prize decks, specifically three-prize decks, because you can only play this like once during the whole game potentially. That being said, it's still sometimes played in those decks, and that shows its insane strength. But then some decks almost rely on it. Relying on it is kind of sketchy because you need to get knocked out, and you need that basic energy in the discard. Once you have these, this becomes like the best supporter in the game, because it's again accelerating energy. Search for any card. The searching for any card is incredibly useful. The accelerating energy is incredibly useful. You see this in like Lost Zone, which has a very solid engine, plus very arguably the best energy acceleration, in my opinion, ever. Maybe not ever, but it's very good. Mirage Kit's kind of broken. So you have this insane deck, but it still plays Raihan. It doesn't always play Raihan, but it usually does one, maybe two, because you get insane value. And this is a deck that wants to play a supporter like every turn during the early game. But then you can Raihan. Raihan is still so good. Raihan is never bad to use. It's so good, especially with cards like Counter Catcher, and then we'll see Prime Catcher, unfortunately, after this rotates, but like Counter Catcher, Cross Switch as well. You have this Gust ability in addition to Raihan. Oftentimes, it's the biggest issue. Raihan isn't like a Gust, because it still is like a draw, kind of. Um, Raihan's super good. Raihan's broken. I don't know if I say broken. It's when it's working, it's broken. It's so good. We've seen cards like it. We've seen teammates and twins. Rosa. Rosa was not broken, but it couldn't search special energy. Right. This is like one of the only cards in the game that searches special energy as well. It's so good. Raihan is like super good. Definitely the best supporter of that year. I don't think there's any debate about that. It's so good, right? It's going to be a really major loss, especially the single prize decks, because this is so good in those, but in other decks as well. Number one is obviously Path to the Peak, right? So Path is one of the best stadiums of all time, if not the best stadium of all time. Like the other one is like broken. I don't know. I don't know older cards that much. So when I say something is the best of all time, I'm probably referring to like the best in the past 10 years, which is what other people say anyway. So I'm allowed to say that now. But like comparing this to like Broken Time Space, I don't know. But Path is super good. Actually, no. You know what? There was that Silent Lab. Silent Lab is probably better than this, but it also wasn't as like good during its era. I'd say Path has defined Pokemon for the past since it came out. It was really broken when it came out. It was like the most important card in the game, and like completely ruined the best deck. It like ruined Shadow Galaxy Max, which is the best deck in the game, which is crazy. And then we saw like Ice Red Calyrex V Max, Victini V Max. There's a bunch of decks. Actually, no, Victini was like kind of good before Path, but it was better with Path. Like had these decks that just were mediocre, but with Path, like everything was mediocre. It forced your opponent into like playing a bad deck. This card is so broken. We obviously have seen UV Max. I'm gonna talk about that some. Genesect V, this stops Genesect V, but then it stops Lumineon V, it stops. And like this is why people don't play Lumineon V as much, because Lumineon V can be super broken. Again, it allows you to access cards like Raihan. But with Path and Blade, it doesn't do that, right? So Path is super broken. It's honestly changed the game. I'm happy it's rotating as well. Pidgeot EX, that's the big one as well. Pidgeot EX um, could obviously be turned off by Path. And so now that we see Path is rotating, Pidgeot EX will be much better. Pidgeot EX is not bad now, but you do have to play massive amounts of stadium bumps. You often see like 5, 6. Sometimes I think I've definitely seen 8, like 8+ stadium. In like Goldengo, you see absurd amounts of stadium bumps. You can see like 4 worker, um, plus like 4 Pokestop plus like Lost Vacuum or something. Maybe not that, but you see a lot of stadium bumps because of Path. But now that Path's gone, you don't need to play stadiums in Charizard. You don't need to play stadiums in Gold.